G'day guys and gal, the death of a Primarch is no small thing. It's always epic, it always has meaning, and it is always the subject of conversation and debate. Can they be brought back? Are they actually dead? Alpharius' death is one of the most debated of all, as everything Alpharius and his legion does is confusing as hell. Especially when you consider that one of Alpharius' Primarch abilities is the power to turn an Alpha Legionnaire into a Demi-Primarch that is nearly indistinguishable from himself, a convincing body double. After all, Alpharius has been killed in lore like over a dozen times now, so is his death at the hands of Rogal Dawn actually real? Before we get started, there is only 1 week left of the current merch drop remaining. We've picked the 4 best, most popular designs from across the years and have brought them back for this limited run, even going as far as to hire some real life females to help with the launch. We have the Only in Death singlet, awesome for the gym or honestly just going out in streetwear, designed with both of those in mind. Then there is the Get Up singlet, which is one of the first merch designs and amazing for the gym, combining the best scene from 40k with a sick design. Now onto the t-shirts. Now I'm a huge fan of t-shirt cuts, making sure they hug the arms and chest but not the stomach, so if you have muscle it shows and if you don't it doesn't. First design is the Loyalty design, my favourite quote from my favourite Primarch on a nice forest green colour, followed up by the Midnight Clad design, an awesome way to pay some respect to the Lords of the Night. The t-shirts can be streetwear or hobbywear or homeware, even chuck one on your missus, should look great. We also still have a small amount of legacy merch from previous drops, all of which are 25% off, so you can also browse some of those designs and tack them onto your order for a nice discount. Link is below, great gift for a friend or just to pick it up for yourself. Today we'll go over the death of Alpharius, determining if he's actually dead or not. Let's get into it. So there are numerous points that bring the death of Alpharius into question. His decoys being a huge one. In lore, Alpharius decoys have been killed by Space Wolves, Ultramarines, other Alpha Legionnaires, and even rectal cancer. That last one isn't confirmed, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised. So could the Alpharius killed by Dawn at the Battle of Pluto just have been another decoy? Well, no, not at all. Whoever Dawn killed at Pluto, it was definitely a Primarch. The evidence of this is numerous. Firstly, the Demi-Primarchs Alpharius can make end up being about as strong as a champion Space Marine, so they stand out against normal Space Marines, but will get absolutely fucking slapped by a Primarch. For example, Khan the Betrayer and Sigismund were about as good as Space Marines could get, the absolute peak of the peak. Khan was battered away by a single hit by Rogal, Sigismund managed to slightly hurt Fulgrim in a surprise attack before getting dumped on his ass. Both of those Space Marines would heavily outclass an Alpha Legion Demi-Primarch. The second piece of evidence is that when Rogal allegedly killed Alpharius, there was a bright flash of light which occurs when Primarchs are killed. There were also other hints, such as the Alpha Legion's almost complete withdrawal from the Heresy post-death, as well as the other Alpha Legion Primarch, because there are 2, sensing the death of his brother. So there was definitely a Primarch death, but was it actually Alpharius who died? Or could it have been Omegon? After all, the 2 brothers would often swap roles, posing as each other or sometimes both as Alpharius. See, Alpharius was the official Primarch of the Alpha Legion. Omegon was a secret that very few knew about, even within the Legion. When Omegon filled in for Alpharius, he took Alpharius' name. So could it have been Omegon that was killed instead? Let's break it down. Out of the 2 brothers, Alpharius was more so the one that bought into the Cabal prophecy, that Horus must win the Heresy decisively so that Chaos was powerful enough to burn itself out. Although the brothers were twins, Alpharius was the greater of equals, as he was raised on Terra, being the only Primarch not scattered, and had original command of the Alpha Legion. Omegon had doubts about the prophecy and more so wanted to be a loyalist, but he could not directly oppose his brother. To make it more confusing, Alpharius thought the Emperor wanted to destroy Chaos above all else, even if it meant the extinction of the human race, so Alpharius believed himself also to be loyalist. Alpharius was spearheading a lot of the genuinely devastating attacks on the Imperial forces during the Heresy, such as the attack on the wounded Space Wolves after Prospero, whilst Omegon actively sabotaged the traitors and helped the loyalists, such as destroying the warp-blocking Alpha Legion station, thus allowing the White Scars to enter the Heresy on the side of the loyalists. But which brother led the attack on Pluto? On one hand, it seemed like a very traitorous thing to do, attack the Sol system, kill Imperials, but the attack was never going to do any serious damage, and honestly seemed more like a game between Alpharius and Rogal. Like it literally started off by Alpharius blowing up all the Primarch statues other than his and Rogal's. When Dawn confronted Alpharius by outplaying him, Alpharius was saying that they wanted the same thing and that they were on the same side. A lot of people think Alpharius was merely exploiting weaknesses in the Sol system's defense for Rogal to fix before the true Chaos invasion arrived. Now Alpharius is not very good at communicating. He decided to play this convoluted game to try flex on Rogal and teach him a lesson, only for Rogal to reverse it, outplay Alpharius and butcher him in a duel. If Alpharius wanted to try help Rogal, he could have sent an email. Alpharius was extremely arrogant. He thought he knew the Emperor's will better than the Emperor, thought he knew everything and had all the cards. That was always Alpharius' weakness, his ego. Omegon, on the other hand, wasn't really like that. He was a lot more subtle and was used to being second to Alpharius. It would be extremely uncharacteristic for Omegon to just gung-ho attack the Sol system. Not to mention, it would also be uncharacteristic for Alpharius to then pull out of the Heresy after Omegon was killed. A huge piece of evidence to support Alpharius being the dude who got clapped was the author who wrote the scene himself stating that Alpharius was the one who was killed on Pluto, not Omegon, which seems to put this whole thing to bed. However, GW has never been one to say, oh yep, I guess our writer said that, we have to respect it now until the end of time. They will happily retcon things or ignore meta commentary on the lore from writers if they want to, and they just may have done so. See, in Alpharius' recently released Primarch book, it was revealed that Alpharius' preferred armor of choice was actually just dressing as a basic space marine, a rank and file Alpha Legionnaire, with one of his abilities being to hide his Primarch aura. Even able to convince the line that he wasn't a Primarch, which is wildly impressive considering the line has an eye for these sorts of things. On the flip side, the classic scale armor and pale spear that is attributed to Alpharius is actually the war gear of Omegon, who found the spear on the world he landed on as a baby. At the end of that book, Alpharius also told Omegon to take up the mantle of Alpharius and reveal his existence to the rest of the Imperium, introducing himself to his brother Primarchs. See, Alpharius had already met the other Primarchs via infiltrating their legions and posing as their own marines. Omegon was to meet them in the official capacity as the Alpha Legion Primarch. So here's where it gets really interesting. Did Omegon permanently take up the mantle of Alpharius, with Alpharius permanently taking up the mantle of Omegon? I mean, yeah, Alpharius could have just taken the armor and spear for himself as symbols of office, but there's a big part of me that thinks Alpharius truly was loyal from day one, having been raised and trained by Malcador, with Omegon being the hyper-arrogant one that was more so on the traitor's side. In this instance, Omegon would have been the one to confront Dawn and be killed, with Alpharius being the one who was trying to help the loyalists. After all, Alpharius was always more subtle, having been trained by the Master of Subtlety, whereas Omegon wasn't and was always more direct. But then it raises another question. Sorry, I hope your brain isn't leaking yet. Does it really matter which brother died? If Alpharius became Omegon and Omegon became Alpharius, and then the Omegon who became Alpharius died, thus the Alpharius who became Omegon lived, does it just get to a point of saying who actually gives a fuck? What is more important is asking if the more loyalist brother is alive or if the more traitor brother is alive. If the more loyalist is alive, then that puts the Alpha Legion in a super interesting place, as we've discussed many times. If the more traitor one is alive, it does end up making the Alpha Legion a bit more generic. We also need to remember that there is a chance, although it's small, that both brothers are dead. Guilliman chased down and fought the Alpha Legion after the Heresy, outplaying them and even killing who he and many others believe to be Omegon. We don't know too many details of what actually happened, but Guilliman was convinced it was Omegon, and we even get Alpha Legionnaire POVs in the current setting who also believe it was Omegon who died, especially since neither Alpha Legion Primarch has been sighted since then, with the Alpha Legion itself falling into disarray and getting split into dozens of different warbands, all with varying goals, objectives, and degrees of loyalty to Chaos or the Throne. Now, I think it would be a waste for both Alpha Legion Primarchs to be dead. More so, I think it was a Demi-Primarch who was killed, with Omegon using it to fake his death so he could fade into the shadows and pull the strings. The good news is we'll probably find out pretty soon, since the Scouring series has currently been written, and I bet that will be the topics of one of the books. So is Alpharius actually dead? Well, there are two potential answers. Either the Alpharius who was left on Terra was the one with the monstrous ego, thought he knew best, took the Pale Spear and Scale Armor into combat at Pluto and got himself killed, leaving the loyalist Omegon in charge but in the shadows. Or Omegon permanently took up the mantle of Alpharius, keeping his spear and armor, was ignorant to the Emperor's will as he was so removed from it, had a monstrous ego, went to Pluto and got killed. The answer originally did seem like it was obviously the first one, but the Alpharius book has muddied the waters a fair bit. Hopefully we'll get clarity on it soon. But with all things involved in the Alpha Legion, the actual answer often doesn't really matter. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up some Majorkill merch. 4 designs, only 1 week left. You do not want to miss out. Hit the subscribe button and hit the subscribe button for more confusing content. Join the Discord for more memes and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.